Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, and this is going to be the Foshgate episode of Mingles with Jingles. For those of you who have been living under a rock for the last few days and have no idea what I'm talking about, it's the massive drama that's been affecting the World of Tanks EU community over the course of the last week, thanks to Wargaming's response to a video that Sir Fosh posted on YouTube. At this point, I feel it's only fair that I do warn you that if you are sick to death of hearing about this whole drama, as I suspect many of you probably are, then you should probably not bother watching any further in this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles, because I'm not really going to be talking about an awful lot else. There are a couple of other things that I want to talk about in this week's episode, but they're going to be tacked onto the end. For the majority of this video, it's all going to be about the drama. So if you've already heard more than enough about it, then feel free to stop watching right now. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about because you've been living under a rock, or if you want to hear what I thought of the whole thing, why I got involved and what happened when I got involved, then stick around, pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable, and I'll begin. Initially, at least, there were only really 3 people directly involved in this whole incident, and that was Sir Fosh, Circumflexes, and one of the Wargaming EU community managers, who everybody knows as Phelan. I'm going to talk about the Circumflexes situation first because it's easier to summarise and far less dramatic than the Fosh incident. So Circumflexes is entertaining people playing World of Tanks on his livestream. That's what he does. He's in his KV220 and he's on the highway map. Now, he does not like the highway map. He thinks it's one of the more poorly designed maps in the game. And while he's on this map, he made the comment during the stream, one of many comments that he made during the stream, that the map looked as if some crayon-eaten kid had blown their nose into a handkerchief. I'm paraphrasing him here. Blown their nose into a handkerchief. That handkerchief had been picked up by a Wargaming map designer and used as the basis for the highway map. So basically a typical Circumflexes funny comment, one of many that he made during the course of the live stream. The one thing that made this one different was that he said that the child in question was Victor Kisley's son. Victor Kisley, of course, being the CEO of Wargaming. Now, this wasn't intended as a personal attack on Victor Kisley or his family. It was just Circumflexes making a joke. Unfortunately for Circumflexes, he chose a very, very bad time to make a joke about Victor Kisley's family. At some point after the video of the live stream went up, somehow this comment got onto Wargaming's radar. Now, one thing that I have noticed over the years when dealing with Wargaming is that they are very, very sensitive about any comments made about their chief executive officer. Anytime you're about to talk to the man, you have to go through a bunch of minions first, whose job seems to be to warn you to treat him with respect. Because, you know, this is our CEO, we're very protective of him, so please remember to treat him with respect at all times, and so on and so on and so on. The man himself is great. He's completely down to earth and he's a really nice guy to talk to. But it's the people between you and him who seem to walk on eggshells around him as if he's royalty. They are very, very protective of their chief executive officer. But I don't think that overly protective attitude that they have towards him explains by itself what happened to Circon when the video where he made that comment appeared on Wargaming's radar. Circon was approached by Phelan, member of the Wargaming EU community team, and asked to take the video down because they considered it offensive towards their chief executive officer's family. Circon had no problem with that. He immediately agreed to take the offending video down. At no point did Phelan ever threaten Circumflexes with a copyright strike on his YouTube channel. Phelan said, please take the video down, we find it offensive. Circumflexes said, yep, no problem. And then Phelan said, and you've had your status as a community contributor for World of Tanks on the EU server revoked. You are no longer part of the community contributor program. Now that seems like a bit of an overreaction. And it's not the kind of overreaction that I think you can completely explain by Wargaming's very protective attitude towards their chief executive officer. You see, what Circumflexes didn't know at the time was that Phelan had just had to deal with Sir Fosh, and he wasn't in the mood for taking prisoners at this point. Now, regardless of whether or not you understand why Phelan overreacted, The point remains that he overreacted, and Circumflexes thought that too. So afterwards he went back to Phelan and said, well, hang on a minute, this is a first offence. And it wasn't intentional. Don't you think your reaction was a little extreme? And after some debate back at Wargaming, they quickly came back and said, actually, you're right, it was a bit of an overreaction. And they reinstated Circumflexes as a community contributor. So all's well that ends well for Circumflexes. Not so for Sir Fosh, and definitely not so for Wargaming. Earlier that day, Phelan had to issue Wargaming's official response to yet another YouTube video, which most of you are probably fully aware of by now. It was Sir Fosh's review, and I use the word review in the broadest possible sense of the word, of the Chrysler K Grand Finals tank. The video was approximately 1 minute and 40 seconds long, and most of it consisted of Sir Fosh saying, fuck Wargaming. He had his reasons, but the manner in which he presented it was salty as fuck. Is the only way I can describe it. I mean, Fosh is known for being a bit salty in the first place, but this video was Fosh turned up to 11. What happened next is where all of the drama begins. Phelan approached Fosh and said words to the effect of, we do not think this video is even slightly appropriate. You've been removed from the community contributor program. You've been removed from the list of TankFest invitations, and also please take this video down. To which Fosh replied, I don't really care what you do, and I'm not taking the video down. At that point, Phelan said to him that Wargaming were going to go through YouTube and take it down with a copyright strike. He then went on to explain to Fosh that if they went down this route, Fosh would not be able to monetize any further Wargaming content on his YouTube channel. Now, Fosh is primarily a live streamer, but he's also got a fair old back catalogue of World of Tanks videos up on his YouTube channel as well. Faced with this kind of threat, and knowing full well what it would mean for his YouTube channel, Fosh felt as if he had no alternative but to comply and take the video down. And that right there is the point at which Wargaming crossed the line. And that's where I in particular started to pay a very keen interest in what was going on, because I've been down this road before, haven't I, with Gaijin Entertainment. And it certainly looked, based on the evidence that was available initially, that Wargaming were going down almost exactly the same route as Gaijin Entertainment with War Thunder, which had led me to break all contact with Gaijin Entertainment and stop publishing War Thunder content on my channel, because I was afraid of getting hit with a copyright strike if I continued to upload videos that they weren't happy with. You see, I'd already had a couple of my videos removed, not from YouTube, must make that very, very clear. I never got hit with a copyright strike from Gaijin Entertainment. I stopped covering their game before I got hit with a copyright strike. But I had various different videos on the War Thunder forums and the War Thunder community site that had been struck. Now, I didn't really have too much of a problem with that, because here's the thing. Everybody goes on about, oh, free speech on the internet and so on, but you don't actually have free speech on a company's forum or a company's community website. In fact, when you signed up for the Gaijin forum and community website for War Thunder, you specifically sign an agreement that says you're not allowed to upload any video content that shows bugs in the game engine or is critical of the game. And the one example that immediately springs to mind is that I did a sort of Why You Have to Be Mad War Thunder edition. And the one scene that I remember most vividly is there was a Stug that had managed to flip himself upside down during a random battle in War Thunder. I think it was an arcade battle, doesn't matter. The point is that the Stug had managed to flip himself, which in itself wasn't a bug in the game engine, but then he sort of started to sink through the ground and bounce around like somebody on crack. And it was pretty funny to watch, especially because he could still fire his gun, and, even though most of the fighting compartment was actually buried underground. I think in the same video I also featured footage of a guy in an Avro Lancaster doing a bomb and run on an AI German cruiser, which doesn't sound remarkable until you realise that the AI German cruiser was parked halfway up a mountainside. So, you know, stuff like that. Gaijin didn't like that. That particular video, and others where I displayed similar content, that got taken down from my War Thunder forum thread, and it also got taken down from the War Thunder community site. But, you know, I didn't really have too much of a problem with that, because at the end of the day, I had signed an agreement that anything like that uploaded on their forum or uploaded on their community site, not YouTube, but on their forum and community site, they would remove. But it soon became pretty clear that Gaijin wanted to go after people on YouTube who were showing the same sort of thing, and it didn't take long before somebody gave them the excuse they were looking for. Fly Daily published a video on YouTube showing an exploit that was being used and abused by a small number of people to get an unfair advantage while playing War Thunder. I can't remember if it was arcade, realistic or sim battle. Not important. The point is, a bug existed in the game engine, some people were aware of it, and they were using it to exploit the game. Gaijin didn't like that, and they went after Fly Daily, and they went after him hard. They claimed that Fly Daily was publicising a cheat and encouraging people to use it, and therefore ruin the game for honest players. They used Fly Daily as the poster boy for the kind of videos on YouTube that they wanted to go after. Videos that were critical of their game, videos that showed bugs in the game engine. The CEO of Gaijin Entertainment, right, we're talking about the guy in charge here. We're not talking about some mid-level prole who happens to work in the community team. We're talking about the guy in charge of Gaijin Entertainment here. So, you know, there can be no doubt in anybody's minds that this was company policy. He started a poll on the War Thunder forums asking players basically for their approval for Gaijin to go after people on YouTube, hit them with copyright strikes and get this sort of content taken down. He wanted to legitimise taking people's YouTube channels down. I'll say this for him, he wasn't incredibly stupid. Not, you know, amazingly stupid. He did at least understand the kind of backlash that Gaijin would suffer if they just went ahead and started taking channels down with copyright strikes. Instead, he tried to at least get some sort of support from the community for going around taking people's YouTube channels down. At that point, I could see the writing on the wall as far as War Thunder was concerned, and I wanted nothing more to do with it. This was corporate policy at the highest level in Gaijin Entertainment. So, when I heard that Fosh had been apparently threatened with a copyright strike for saying something that Wargaming didn't approve of, I started to get an alarming sense of déjà vu. So the first thing I did, because this could directly affect me, was I went onto Discord. Now, the EU community contributors have their own Discord channel, which we use to talk to each other and the Wargaming community team. And the first thing that I saw when I went on there was a statement from Phelan. And that statement basically said, most of you have probably noticed that Sir Foss was removed from the community contributor program and was asked to remove the content about the Chrysler K from his channel. This is not because he criticised the tank of the company, but because of the way he did it. We are fine with you guys criticising our content in your videos, and we don't plan to censor your content in any way. There was more, but that's the basic gist of the statement. There was no mention in that statement about any kind of copyright strike. So at this point, completely unclear whether or not anybody had been hit with a copyright strike or threatened with a copyright strike, which in my mind is just as bad. So that was the first thing that I wanted to know. So I went on to Discord and I said, what concerns me are the claims that copyright strikes were issued against Fosh and possibly also against Circon too. If true, this is completely unacceptable. The emphasis, however, is on the word if. I've seen a comment from Fosh saying he was asked to take the video down, but a lot of people are throwing the DMCA phrase around with reckless abandon. I'd like this clarified, and sooner rather than later. Asking someone to take a video down is fine. Hitting them with copyright action or threatening that copyright action will be taken if they don't comply with a takedown request is not fine. I used to give extensive coverage to another mid-20th century tank combat game until they started to pull that shit. I used to. So, question 1, was copyright action taken? And question 2, was copyright action threatened? An early response would be appreciated, but I'd rather the answer was correct than quick. Thank you in advance. Some time went by while we were waiting for a response, during which the internet went berserk. If Phelan had woken up that morning thinking he was going to have a bad day because he was going to have to deal with Fosh and circumflexes, I don't think he had the slightest inkling of the biblical shitstorm that was about to hit the internet because he'd threatened Fosh with a copyright strike. And as it turned out, he had threatened Fosh with a copyright strike. We were still not completely 100% aware of the truth of the matter at this time, certainly not in the Discord channel for the community contributors. Obviously, Fosh wasn't there to give us his side of the story because he was no longer a community contributor. But looking at what was going on the internet, it started to become increasingly apparent to us that a copyright strike had in fact been threatened, even though we had not yet had any kind of clarification from Phelan in particular, or Wargaming in general. Jim Sterling had picked up on it, and immediately did a video. Jim Sterling is not somebody that I'd ever actually heard of, but that's, it's no criticism of Jim Sterling, it's just that we don't really move in the same circles or cover the same kind of games. Total Biscuit, also no stranger to false copyright claims, tweeted about the subject. Numerous different gaming websites picked up on the story and started running with it. Wargaming's bad day was about to get a whole lot worse. Meanwhile, I'm still sitting in the community contributor Discord channel, as were most of the community contributors, anxiously awaiting the news of what had actually happened and who had said what to who. At which point I made another statement. I'd like to see this denied by somebody in Wargaming, but if it's confirmed, I'm out. I don't have an issue with their asking for the videos to be removed on the grounds of slander. That would be entirely justified. Actually, more on that in a moment. That's quite important. Even if Sercon's comment was an off-the-cuff reaction rather than a premeditated attack like Fosh, but threatening to take copyright action over an issue that isn't even remotely related to copyright just to shut them up is so not acceptable that I'm actually at a loss to express just how fucking outraged I am. If that's what happened. If it is what happened, and we don't see some kind of apology for a gross misuse of the copyright system, then I am out of the community contributor program. I have zero issue with Wargaming protecting themselves from slander using the appropriate systems. I believe they were entirely justified in both cases to ask that the offending videos be removed, and also to remove Fosh from the program. But I cannot and will not be part of any community that uses false copyright claims to silence their critics, however. But a quick word about slander, because that's one of the terms that Wargaming were using to describe Fosh's video. They said it was a slanderous video. Truth is an absolute defense against slander. What that means is that it doesn't matter how offensively you say it. If it's true, it is not slanderous. And that's something that seemed to be getting lost by the wayside in the massive fuss over what Fosh said and Wargaming's reaction to it, because while Fosh's video was undoubtedly laced with profanity and highly offensive, that doesn't necessarily mean that what he was saying wasn't true. So Fosh's video was definitely offensive. It was probably not slanderous. That just left the issue of whether or not Wargaming actually had a claim for copyright. Now, straight away, everybody says that gaming videos on YouTube are protected under the terms of fair use. Unfortunately, it's not actually quite as simple as that. Now, I am not going to go into great detail explaining how fair use does and does not apply. If you are interested and you care, iChase did a video the other day where he did a very, very good job of explaining it. I'm certainly not going to repeat it all here because it took them 16 minutes to explain how fair use applies in this particular case. But the long and short of it is that if Wargaming were to pursue a copyright strike against Fosh, they would probably be successful, because it's not fair use until you stand in front of a judge and convince him that it is. And in the case of gameplay videos uploaded onto YouTube, there are a number of criteria that you have to satisfy in order for it to be considered fair use. And again, not going to go into great detail about it, but most of those criteria, in the case of gameplay videos on YouTube, they fall in favour of the game developer, not the guy making the video. So you would have a hard time convincing a judge that fair use applied and no copyright liability existed. But then it gets even more complicated, because Fosh didn't actually use any World of Tanks gameplay footage in the video. He went to the tanks.gg website. Now, they use World of Tanks 3D models on their website, but now there's a third party involved, so it started to get really, really complicated. That's pretty much all you need to know. Possibly Wargaming could have made a copyright claim stick, possibly they couldn't. We'll never know because they never pursued a copyright claim, but one was definitely threatened. because it was at around about this time where Phelan went onto the World of Tanks forums and published a statement basically confirming, amongst other things, but confirming that a threatened copyright strike had been used against Foch. So after reading that statement, I went back onto Discord and asked Phelan, is this the extent of the official statement on the issue that I asked for, or does Wargaming have anything else to say? Because if this is it, I've got an announcement of my own to prepare. They'd confirmed that they'd threatened Foch with a copyright claim, but there was no hint of an apology for doing so, and there was certainly no hint of any kind of assurance that they would never do this again in future. So at that point, I didn't really have any choice in what I was going to do. My hands were pretty much tied. Wargaming had backed me into a corner there. There was no way I could remain part of the community contributor program with this kind of threat hanging over my neck. Because if they can do it to Foch, what's to stop them from doing it to me? Now, I've never published a video that was as deliberately offensive as the one that Foch made, but I've certainly published videos that were critical, sometimes highly so, of Wargaming and their products. Just have a look at any World of Warplanes video I've ever done. But it's not just World of Warplanes. I mean, it's easy to kick World of Warplanes, because World of Warplanes is thoroughly deserving of being kicked. But I've done other videos that were critical of Wargaming products. The Kanonen Jagdpanzer, for example. I did a review of that, and it wasn't particularly nice. What do you mean you don't know what the Kanonen Jagdpanzer is? Well, exactly. Nobody bought one. Because it's garbage. And I said so. I had a few words to say about the Black Edition premium tanks as well. Do you remember those? The new improved T-34. It's black. And more expensive, you know, yeah. I regularly call out Wargaming on their shenanigans and give them a good roasting in Monday's Mingles with Jingles. And nobody from Wargaming has ever come after me over it. They haven't always been entirely happy with some of the things that I've said, and I know for a fact that my videos on World of Warplanes cost me early access into the alpha test of World of Warships. I didn't actually get into World of Warships until the closed beta. But nobody from Wargaming ever explicitly came after me. The same cannot be said of what was going to happen in the future, however. They'd gone after Foch. They'd gone after Sercon. Sercon just agreed to take the video down, but I have no doubt that they would have threatened copyright action against Sercon as well if he'd said no. They had definitely threatened copyright action against Foch. What's to stop them from doing that again in the future, particularly if they're not apologising for it and they're not issuing assurances that they won't do it again in the future? I'm a World of Tanks and World of Warships community contributor. I go to community events as part of this whole community contributor program. And I represent Wargaming to the community, and I represent the community to Wargaming. And part of that involves standing up, which up until now I've been entirely happy to do because I like Wargaming as a company and I like their products. And so part of that deal has been going to events like Tankfest, for example, which is just around the corner. Worst possible timing, Wargaming. Tankfest is just around the corner, and you're alienating all of your community contributors right before your biggest public relations event of the year. They couldn't have timed this worse if they possibly tried, because they're now expecting me to go and stand in front of a bunch of World of Tanks fans at Tankfest with a Wargaming logo behind me saying, Wargaming are great. When they've got this whole threat of copyright strike hanging over all of our heads if we say anything or do anything that somebody at Wargaming thinks might be out of line. I do not fucking think so. So I told them, okay, well, thanks. I have an announcement to prepare. And went away to think about how best to draft the announcement that I was, well, at first, quitting the Wargaming Community Contributor Program, which was, you know, the first thing I was going to do, and then would have to have a good long hard think about whether I was prepared to take it any further, because, well, at the end of the day, this is corporate censorship on the same scale that Gaijin tried to pull. And I boycotted War Thunder as a result of that. Surely I would have to boycott World of Tanks and World of Warships as well. And it would have hurt, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I would manage fine without doing World of Tanks or World of Warships content. I guarantee you. I mean, I'm sitting here at 554,000 subscribers. I guarantee you that if I stopped uploading World of Tanks and World of Warships videos, you could probably kiss goodbye to 300,000 at least of those subscribers. And I couldn't blame them. You know, if you're here for World of Tanks and World of Warships content, and I'm not doing World of Tanks and World of Warships content, you're going to go somewhere else. That would hurt. It wouldn't be the end, because I do have my Navy pension to fall back on, but, well, I wouldn't be lighting the barbecue with £50 notes anymore. I mean, it would hurt, but I'd live. Other World of Tanks YouTubers, not necessarily in the same position. You know, there are some guys that only do wargaming content on their channel. I mean, I basically almost only do wargaming content on my channel, but I do diversify a little. I'd survive. It'd be tough, but I'd survive. And other community contributors were definitely also thinking about their status. I know for a fact Pointy Head Jedi was, and I have no doubt that others were as well, but it was going to be a much, much harder decision for some of those guys to make than it was for me. I mean, it wasn't an easy decision for me, but I at least had options. Some of those other guys don't, and so what must have been going through their minds, I have no idea. However, within 5 minutes of me saying, well, I have an announcement to prepare, I got a PM over Discord asking if I had time to take a Skype call from Florian Mental. Now, those of you who don't know who he is, he's the head of community relations for Wargaming EU. So he's fairly high up the feeding chain. It basically goes Victor Kisley, Marcus Schill, who is the general manager of Wargaming EU, and then Florian Mental. So he's kind of a big deal. Now, I've actually met Florian. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a friend, but, you know, we've had a couple of beers, we've met a few times, and we've had a couple of meals together, and we've had some good chats, and I like him. He's a good guy. So, you know, okay, fair enough. We'll see what he has to say. So I put my letter of resignation on hold, and I took the Skype call with Florian, and I had a very, very good chat with him. I mean, I like Florian in the first place, but, you know, I like him even more as a result of this Skype call. He was clearly not having a very good day, just to put it mildly. But he left me with no doubt whatsoever. And he did, by the way, I should probably make it clear that he did give me permission. I did ask at the end of the Skype call if I could refer to the content of the Skype call. And he was absolutely fine. He wasn't trying to hide anything from anybody. There was total transparency. He said, yep, you know, once we're done, you can say anything to anybody. That's the point. We're not trying to censor anybody. But he left me in absolutely no doubt whatsoever that if he'd had anything to do with it, no threat of copyright action would ever have been taken against Fosh. And as long as he remains in charge of Wargaming EU's community relations, no copyright threats will ever be issued against anybody on YouTube, Twitch, or anybody else for that matter. And that's all I wanted to hear, because my biggest fear was that there was now this corporate policy of using threats and leverage to get people to toe the party line with Wargaming, but that is absolutely definitely not the case. What remained to be done at that point was to communicate that to the community as a whole. And I said this to Florian, you know, that's great, you know, it's fantastic saying it to me, but you need to say it to the community. And sooner rather than later, but it's more important you get it right than you get it quick. And he agreed and said, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll prepare a statement to that effect and prepare an apology and this and that and the other. But it may take some time. I might have to run it through the legal department first and so on and so on. So, yeah, fine, no problem. Take it as long as you like, but get it right. Well, it seemed that he felt he was under some kind of pressure to actually get a statement out there quickly, because despite the fact that I'd said to him, it's actually quite funny, you know, get it right rather than get it quick. He got it quick and he very nearly fucked it up. The very next thing I heard was that there was an all-new shitstorm on the forums because the head of community relations had claimed that they never pursued a copyright strike. So, when I went to investigate further and see for myself exactly what it was Florian had said, it became immediately obvious that no lawyer had been within a country mile of this statement. He'd obviously felt like there was significant pressure to get some sort of message out there to the community as soon as possible, and he'd obviously prepared this himself and not run it by anybody else, because here's the problem here in the EU. What you have here is a German head of community preparing a message in English and putting it on the forums, which are read by people who speak 40 different languages. And English isn't necessarily their best one. And so some miscommunication had been going on. He hadn't actually said that they never claimed they threatened anybody with a copyright strike. He said they never claimed a copyright strike, i.e. they never went through the process of initiating a copyright strike, but that kind of got lost in translation and threatened to create an even bigger shitstorm than what had started it in the whole place. So he very quickly followed it up with another statement which clarified things somewhat and also contained an apology. The second statement said, "I understand that my statement can be seen dubious." Again, this had obviously never been run by through a lawyer or a native English language speaker, but it's what he means that's important. "I understand that my statement can be seen dubious compared to the screenshot posted." He's talking about the chat log posted by Sir Fosh, which proved that a copyright threat had been made. However, I want to point out that there was no copyright claim done on Sir Fosh, and I assure you it wouldn't have come to that. That leaves the questions on our communication yesterday with Sir Fosh, where the focus was completely and only on his vocabulary. Unfortunately, the wrong words had been chosen to express the importance of the situation to us, and I apologise to Sir Fosh. Censorship was in no way ever the goal. We will certainly learn from the situation and will continue to work on the we communicate. Again, English. Doesn't matter. What's important is that there is no corporate culture of censorship at Wargaming. Not as long as Florian Mental is the head of community relations, and he's made that, I believe at least, abundantly clear, and apologised for the initial threat that was made against Sir Fosh. So how did we get to this conclusion? Did we get there by lighting the torches, grabbing the pitchforks and storming the castle? Well, I certainly think that a certain amount of pitchfork waving and torch burning needs to be done in these kind of circumstances. Otherwise, how will the companies understand the massive sense of outrage that we feel whenever there's the threat or even the implication of censorship from the companies? There's certainly a place for that. And, if nothing else, it's a nice piece of street theatre to keep you entertained while you wait for the next drama. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that there's a certain amount to be said for staying calm, not losing your shit, tuning out all of the bullshit, establishing what the facts are, and then addressing those facts and communicating and trying to come to a conclusion that keeps everybody happy. I'm certainly a lot happier than I was a couple of days ago, because I can continue to play the games that I like, and more importantly, I can continue to do videos of the games that I like, and be honest with the games that I like, without this whole threat of censorship that I felt had been hanging over my head for the last couple of days. And hopefully that means you lot are going to be happier than you may have been over the last couple of days, because it means you can still turn up and get your regular dose of World of Tanks and World of Warships and, whatever the hell else I feel like covering on any given day. I don't know, maybe this has been a bit of a wake-up call in more ways than one. Maybe it doesn't pay to keep all of your eggs in the same basket. Perhaps I should be diversifying more than just a different video on Casual Saturday once a week. We shall have to see, but rest assured, for now at least, plenty of World of Tanks, plenty of World of Warships. And looking forward to seeing you all at Tankfest. And let's not forget, MCM London Comic Con is next weekend. I will be there Friday and Saturday, not Sunday, however. Sunday I have to come home and do an episode of Mingles with Jingles that doesn't involve talking about a scandal with wargaming. That would be nice. I didn't really want to spend this entire episode talking about it, but it needed to be done. But I've done it now, I've gotten it out of the way, and we can get back to our regular programming as soon as humanly possible. That is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I'm not going to say I hope you enjoyed it, because there's not a lot to enjoy. But it needed to be done, and now it's done, and we can get back to having some fun. So take care, and as always, I'll catch you next time.